Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome back again in another session, not for the faint-hearted people. This session is for the advanced professional translators out there who work in the field and they are looking for enrichment of their skills and their potentials to improve their level one step forward. And hopefully, from the discussion that we have here today, we're going to reach a consensus that translation is not an easy subject to dabble in and work in, but it's always a constant battlefield where you get tsunami of expressions and terminology that you need to overcome their interpretation and get the meaning across. One of the landmarks in the field of translation is an essay that was written in 1923 by a German philosopher. His name is Walter Benjamin. In this essay that was written in 1923, he talked about the concept of translation. He talks in this essay about the major concepts that any translator needs to bear in mind when he's doing the job of translation. He starts by discussing the major concepts and challenges of translation in this elongated kind of essay that is considered as a valid landmark in the field of translation to this point. In this essay, the writer talks about the concept of a translation from a theoretical point of view and how to bridge the gap with the target text in the target language that we are translating into or to. First of all, he talks about the concept of translation not from the point of prescriptively trying to convey or convert this text from the source language into the target language, but rather to focus on the meaning, the communicated message, by saying, in order to arrive at an equivalence of the original, the translation must have certain suppleness, and this cannot be obtained without the renunciation of a strict equivalence. The intention of a translation is to hold to the spirit, not to the letter, even when it concerns the literature of knowledge. It seeks to let the pulse of the original beat perceptibly in the translation. And by that, he focuses on the point that the text that we're translating is actually a spirit, and this spirit should be transferred and communicated within the context of cultural, educational, political point of view in order to give the text its originality, but also to preserve the communicable meaning of the original text. So in a sense, the job of translation is a job of gain and loss. Sometimes when the translator conducts the job of translation, he sacrifices some of the original text for sake of contextualizing it within the target language. So it is really hard sometimes to convey the message from the original text into the target text without having some gains or some losses of the original text. And when we talk about gains, we talk about looking at the text from another perspective, because the writer, when he writes something, he writes it from subjectively his point of view. But when the text is translated by an outsider, not the original author, he will definitely give another perspective to the original text. And it will definitely give it a sense of another interpretation. The other interpretation that has been conducted by the second interpreter is going to give some gain to the source text that we have transferred into the target language and conditioned it to the target language. The author also talks about the case of flawed language. And when we talk about flawed language, he's simply saying that there is no one perfect language. Inherently, all the human languages have some flaws. So when we transfer the text from the original language to the target language, it might get flawed inherently just because this language sometimes fails to purely convey the meaning intended, the spiritual part of the meaning that is intended to the target audience. And he calls this the limited ability of fully conveying the richness of a human experience. So let's imagine that, the limited ability of conveying the meaning and the richness of a human experience. Human experience cannot be conveyed purely by words. And if you think for a moment, how many times have you said in your life, there is no one word in English or Arabic that conveys that sense of meaning that I'm trying to say? So there's always this dichotomy. There's always this chasm of interpretation of meaning through words. Despite the fact that the essay is very long, and I'll leave the link to the original essay that I highly recommend any translator working in the field of translation to have a look at it, read it in depth in order to understand the major concepts that have been permeated through this amazing and rich essay in terms of the linguistics of writing of this essay, in addition to the kind of words that were intended to convey to the translator. He's saying that there's nothing called neutral translation. When the translator translates, he is influenced prospectively and subjectively by the cultural, political, and social context and his background. So he is going to be biased at one point in terms of conveying the meaning intended or conveying an idea. And let's imagine ideas are purely things that are not existing in reality, but actually they are the brainchild of our thinking. So it's really hard to contextualize that and package it in terms of words, and words have always limitations. As a translator, your job is to always consider the fact that there are multiple perspectives for your translation, and try to always listen to other people when you're translating. Think of the ideas that you're presenting based on the experiences that's said or communicated by other people. And let's sum it up with this quote that is fascinatingly saying his ideas regarding translation by saying, "The task of the translator consists in finding the intended effect or intention about the language into which he is translating, which produces in it the echo of the original." So he's just saying that whatever kind of translation that you have is just an echo of the original text, because there's no matter one professional translator that can convey the meaning of the original text 100%. He's adding, the task of the translator thus implies a dual movement between two languages and two cultures. In fact, the translator cannot remain limited to purely linguistic concerns. His work inevitably becomes political as well. So ultimately, the essence of this essay is that the translator is a mediator between two battling cultures. It's a tug of war of meaning and context and politics and culture. So the socio-cultural context of this original language and target language may interfere with the interpretation of the original translation of the translator. And that is going to be bridged, in a sense, by the translator's reading and awareness that there are multiple versions of his translation. I highly recommend you read this article. This is a very brief and succinct summary of the original essay that was based on my reading and understanding, and I need to go through multiple readings of this essay. Hopefully in future, I'll get the chance to read it by my voice and submit it to you to listen to and benefit from. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you in another interpretation and translation session. Have a wonderful day.